Yes, I'm the guy that takes Space Marine characters and puts female elf heads on them, but we'll get into that a little bit later of why I do that. The color palette for this was fairly simple. The idea behind it was I wanted a cross between Synthwave and Grimdark. Now, these are very, very opposing ideologies as far as painting goes. Some concessions had to be made and some ideas kind of had to be left out, but for the most part, I think I could get the best of both worlds. So I took a very, very desaturated green. This is actually the deep sea blue, but it comes out green, so I don't know what's going on there. And obviously anything I do to the armor, I'm repeating on the power pack and the shield because they're all the same damn color. It'd be stupid if I didn't. Highlighting the green, I'm just adding a little bit of blue-green from Vallejo and just little bits, take a step up, do a next one. It's just to build up some highlights, a little bit of dynamics while keeping the same feel, but I wanted to go into the blue-green to kind of pull back into that synthwave feel. This is already a pretty busy model and I didn't want to go insane and blow my load, overdoing it with some of the highlighting on the armor. So we're just going to pick a few little spots to really kind of hone in on to give it that feel of there's some light reflection, here's the sharpest points, here's the highest points. This is where the light's going to catch for this. Now with the cape, I wanted a silken, almost satin feel to it. I wanted a lot of dynamics and a lot of contrast between the recesses or the depth of the cloak to the peaks, the very highest points. I thinned this purple down quite substantially. Now this took 3 or 4 passes to really build up the opacity, but we built it up smoothly, and that is probably the biggest point, especially when you're talking a cloak where you're going to see any of those ripples and tears really stick out. Now to pick out the highlights, all I'm doing is mixing in some magenta with that original purple, and all I'm doing is picking out the highest spots. That's it. There's no magic behind this. The magic is that everybody can do it. And it looks like it was very stark, but it was quite a thin mix. Now, when you thin paints down like this, they go on a lot lighter and brighter than what they will dry as. But it also helps us out by being able to see where we've painted, and then it dries and we can get a lovely gradient, which is the whole idea behind this. And if I got my fat head out of the way, you'd be able to see what I'm doing. So after all the highlights, I started working on the recesses. Now, I only do half the highlights because I want to see what the contrast is like. I don't like going full ball sack into something and then finishing off a different section and find out that it looks horrible together. So only after I've started to do the recesses will I go back in and just do the very highest peaks. Now, this is a straight magenta, and after this I actually mix a little bit of pink into that magenta as well, just to take it that little bit higher. And with this light pink, now I'm just picking out the parts where the light would be the most intense, and that's where this contrast is going to come from. Once this is all done, this is what's really going to sell it. The Lion's Belt was a lot of fun. So I started off with the mid-tone of Skeleton Legion from Two Thin Coats, and I absolutely love the Two Thin Coats range. Now with a lighter color of Vampire Fang, I'm just going to start sketching in these little lines, little scratches and strokes to build up the texture to make it actually feel like fur. And this is just the beginning of the process to build up those highlights and build up those textures. Just like the cloak, after we've done some highlighting, I'm going to go in and put a little bit of Battle Mud Wash in the recesses to give us some contrast. It's the dynamics that really sell a lot of these details. And then we're going to come back in with an even lighter color, again this is an ivory, and keep stroking away, selling the effect that this is fur. There's thousands of millions of ridiculous amount of strands all coming together to sell one feeling. And that same battle mud wash, I'm just going to run over the end of the tail just to give it that little bit of gradient and go into a darker tip just to make it feel a little bit more realistic. And then we black out the claws, and that's really it. It doesn't have to be a super hard detail, like the trim of the cloak, and that's why I skipped it. For the lion head motif, I just started off with the same green blue that we were mixing in for the armor highlights. Now, I used this as a base coat, and instead of just lightening it up, I actually switched paces and started highlighting with a very light blue. The blue was actually very, very similar, obviously just without the green hues. From here on out, with all the highlights, I just mixed in a little bit of white star from Two Thin Coats to start desaturating the blues. And then using that exact same process, we're going to do the belt. Now, I'm not going to go over it much because it's literally what we just did, and it's not that interesting. Like, it's a damn belt. Now, what you might notice is the non-metallic metal that I tried here with the blue-green on the shoulders. Now, I thought it was starting to look a little bit too busy while also blending everything in. So with some of the smaller details, I tried a true metallic gold, and I quite liked how it looked. So all that work on the non-metallic, which wasn't fantastic, I painted over in black just to get a good color, and then just went straight back over with the gold, which is fine, I guess. The idea behind the wings on the power pack is very, very simple. It's a little bit of that blue-green again with a little bit of white just to line it up. Every single layer is going to be more and more white, but we don't take it to a pure white because that's just a bit too intense. What I really want to talk about is this head. Now, we are going to talk about why this head is on this body, but first I want to talk about blonde hair. Now, I like to start from a medium brown, and this is going to sound like I know what I'm talking about when I probably don't, but I like to move through sandy colors, so light creamy bones, that kind of thing. The yellow makes it look too comical, it's too animated, it's too cartoony. If that's what you're after, 100% go after it. I used a little bit of ice yellow to bring a little bit of that sheen in as a final highlight, but that's it. And that's kind of what you get left with. Now let's talk about the head, because painting faces is painting faces. The head. Why do I keep putting female elf heads on Space Marine bodies? And it's a simple answer. I like to do it. But how it all started was I was on holidays with my family when I stopped in at a hobby store. And that just happened to be the weekend that the Ragnar Blackmane refresh model came out. And I picked one up, took it back to the cabin, and I assembled it, everything except for the head, which I was leaving off for sub-assemblies because I had delusions of grandeur thinking I was going to actually paint it to a display level. Fast forward a year, I couldn't find a head that I liked on it. I tried a bunch of different heads, a bunch of different, bear Space Marine heads, Space Marine helmets, all those kind of things. It just, nothing looked right. So the Guardians kit for Eldar came out, and this was quite some time afterwards, and it had a top knot head in there which had the same expression. Now it was actually started off, it was a male head, so I clipped that out and put it in, and I just didn't like how it looked. It was a little bit too small. But then again, I also loved how the smaller head made the armor feel bulkier. Now we see a lot of this in 40k art where they have little itty bitty heads in this big bulky power armor. So I tried it, and I didn't like it with the male head, so I tried it with the female head, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Now, naturally the pun came straight out that it was Rhonda Blackmane. I shared it into a couple of circles and they all found it hilarious, and that was it. And this was before Heresy for Heretics. This is before this channel was a thing. But that model did become an integral part of what the channel became. In the beginning, I didn't have many models that weren't from the armies that I played specifically, and trying to do the 40k and 40 seconds miniature battle reports, it got pretty boring pretty quickly just using the same model. So obviously I pulled out Rhonda fairly early on in the piece, and out of nowhere I found that people absolutely loved it. There was a bunch of people that identified with it, a bunch of people that for some reason they took a lot of solace in this model that had kind of come out of nowhere, and from no idea. There was no malice, no agenda. It was purely happenstance that this became a thing. And when everybody started to kind of enjoy it, I started looking at what else we could do, and from there we moved on to Abigail the Despoiler, and Melissa Calgar, and just a whole host of other pun-related names and kind of gender bending, if you will. All these Space Marines, and it was just so cool, and I've had such a positive experience with it. Now, obviously, you get your few bad eggs. There is a very, very loud minority that just seem to be very stuck in the ways of it's not lore, so it shouldn't happen. Which is very strange considering how satirical the 40k universe is. But this is also where my involvement comes from for the Fabulous Marines event, which is happening now. In celebration of Pride Month, a lot of fantastic creators are getting together to raise money for the Trevor Project. Now, the Trevor Project helps at-risk teens from the LGBTQ community, helping them find a safe space and somebody to talk to, which a lot of the time that can be a saving grace. That can save a life. Talking to somebody and acknowledging them can change somebody's world. There's links in the description where you can find out more about the Trevor Project and more about the Fabulous Marines event. And speaking of supportive, I just want to take a moment to thank this week's sponsor, In-Games. Now, In-Games have been a local store of mine for quite some time, and I've had quite a bit to do with them over the years. And just knowing the team and the owners and how incredibly passionate and supportive they are of the hobby community. They're always looking for new creators that they can help out, always looking for new events that they can either help kind of gain some traction or create some events in places where they don't exist. Their whole reason for being is this miniature hobby and a miniature community, and that is such a rare thing to find. So you will find links for In-Games in the description of this video. You will find In-Games logos popping up all over the majority of my videos, especially 40k and 40 seconds. These guys are what we should really all be aiming to kind of be and aspire to as far as supporting the supporters. And I just want to throw a massive big love out to you guys. And now it's time to finally check out the Lioness El'Jondaughter.